All right, we are back live on the new YouTube channel. So, welcome to Lifecrafting with Alena. And if you are listening to our podcast, hello to you all over at the Reminder Remedy podcast. You guys, I am so excited to talk to you about today's guest. And I know I pretty much start every episode like that, but for real, like I'm so excited because you all have heard me mention on the show and just in talking on Instagram about this new business partner and this new wonderful person in my life, and I tag her frequently, and I know that you all have just been wondering, like, who in the world is this new Kyra Hardwick person? I had one of my bridesmaids the other day. She was like, "So who is this Kyra person you spending so much time with?" And I was like, "Oh, I have to tell you with her. So I'll tell you about her." So welcome, Kyra. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Alena. I'm really, really good. I'm excited to be here and to be a part of your world. So thank you for having me. And I guess we're gonna tell tell your friends exactly what's been going on around here.
Exactly. Because, I am definitely someone who kind of sticks to what I know in terms of friendships. And even when it comes to business, I tend to be very selective with people who I let into my coaching business and my consulting practice because it is so new and I'm still, crafting it for, pun intended. But we have talked about the alignment around just us as individuals and just how it felt so right. So I want to first just kind of talk about that, right? Because that was just like a moment in time that I have mentioned on the podcast before. And it kind of went like, okay, Nicole introduced us. So shout out to Nicole.
Shout out to Nicole Coleman. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, girl.
Coleman, y'all. And if you know Nicole, you know that she is a connector. And I had just launched the Reminder Remedy, and Nicole is great about always just kind of checking in and like celebrating my wins with me and letting me know she's proud of me. She was like, "What can I do for you?" And I was like, honestly, like, I would love to just be introduced to like some amazing women. And, on the spot, she just kind of was like, "Well, I want to introduce you to Kyra. Like, I just feel like y'all would really vibe." She didn't even really tell me what you did or who you were. And what was so interesting was that, we connected maybe like a week later. And we got on Zoom because obviously COVID, and she's in Houston for those of you all that don't know. And as soon as we got on Zoom, we're doing our highs, how you doing? And you were like, "So, Alena, tell me a little bit about yourself and like, how you're impacting the world or how you want to impact the world." And I just remember thinking like, holy crap, like that is a crazy question. Like, who is this person? But it was just such a beautiful moment and a wonderful question, especially for someone like me who just really hates small talk, because it allowed us to really go deeper, faster. And I feel like in that conversation, I walked away understanding who you were, like who you really were, not your titles, not what you do, but like who you really were. And I felt like it was one of the first conversations that I had really had the opportunity to talk about my vision for how I impact the world and my vision for myself post my sales career. And so that was just a really refreshing conversation. And so I want to kind of know, like, how did you become this person that just knows how to connect with people on just a human level?
Man, well, that was big. I mean, I really follow my gut. Like my
Mm-hmm.
instinct is that's my compass. And I will say I remember first on the strength of, Nicole knowing me well enough to know the right kind of person. So I think it really does help to make sure you have really good relationships before you ask someone to connect you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's really what made it almost a no-brainer because I'm like, well, if Nicole knows, if NRC knows, then Alena is probably the person for me to connect with.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did some research on you, I'm gonna tell my part of the story, then I'm gonna answer your question. Then when I did some research on you, I realized that you're somebody that I have been following, and I was like under this impression that you had like this, and you correct me every time. You're like, I don't know what YouTube you were watching, but I have been following you in this your life, like this fun life experience. And I was like, girl, I watch you in your kitchen with your kids and da, 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 da.
Mhm.
And you were like, what were you watching me on? I'm like, girl, I think I was on your YouTube channel for hours. One day I just really binged on you. And it was just, I think, a part of just what made my feed great, in that moment. And I was like, whoever she is, she's really real. And I could tell there was a real and a polish that went together that was creating something that you weren't necessarily showing us, but
Mhm.
it was there. And so it was all implied. And so I was just like, when I realized that's who you were, I was like, well, wait a minute. So then it was so beautiful just to be able to say, like, how do you impact the world? Like, I really wanted to understand you. And
Mhm.
I know, at this stage of the game, especially in COVID, like, so being so intentional around the time, how much time are you spending with other people, relationships that you're connecting with, or people you're connecting with to build relationships was really important to me in that moment. It still is right now, but I was very much so praying for connections that made sense. I didn't want,
Mhm.
those lopsided connections in my space. And so I felt you immediately, like your energy was like totally transferable, and it just made sense. And I wanted to understand you for real. So I think how I became this, I follow my gut, and I pray very specifically. And I trust that when God makes a connection, that it's the one that I need. And so I try very hard to be very intentional about the questions that I ask. And when I know, I just know, because I don't even remember how long that call was. I feel like it's just all been one long Zoom call for the last 2 years, a
Right.
year and a half. But I do feel like I walked away knowing that you were an amazing part of the vision that I had, and I was
Mhm.
grateful that we shared an understanding around that for both of our lives. And so I think I walked away just feeling grateful for getting to know you, and knowing
Mhm.
an answer was available, and that this thing I had written hadn't really talked about had a solution. And so
Mhm.
um that's my answer. I'm like that with everybody though. So I'm an Aquarius, so if you get close, we family, because it takes a minute to get in here. And so if you get in, you get behind the veil, like it's for real. So that's
Yeah.
just how I am.
Yeah, you are. I mean, I think it's just been just such a joy, on the show where I'm always referencing pattern, and I've got you in the pattern too. But one of the things that the pattern app talked about was how it's so important for me to work in environments where I am able to not only be myself, but I don't necessarily have to prove my worth. And I
Yeah.
don't know that I really knew how much of an impact environments where you're constantly having to say like, "Oh, I'm good enough," or "I'm let me prove my worth to you,"
Mhm.
can really be misaligned if that's not like your personality type, right? And so I think that on the back end, I was able to see like, oh wow, like this is why this relationship feels so cohesive, because I can show up no makeup, with my baby on me and still be here. And you're not looking at me like, oh, she's this person that, lacks time management, but more so like, oh no, we're all moms, we get it done. Like you're just really good about that. So I just want to just have a moment to say like, thank you so much for just having the spirit of discernment to kind of create relationships that are based off of instinct but just genuine connection, and I think that just is such a strength for you. But with that being said, I would love to just kind of learn a little bit more about your background.
Mhm.
And I feel like, my trip in Houston, we got a chance to like dibble and dabble into that. But I want to hear the story. Like, give us a little bit about like present day. How did you get to this place? Where did you come from? Like, who is Kyra?
Well, like that's the hardest paper to write in college. Goodness, I don't know, girl. I just showed up. So listen, okay, so I'm gonna give you goodness, where do I start? So I don't know. I feel like I'm a feeler, and I hate to admit that because people would tell me that all the time. They're like, "You're so sensitive. You're so this." I'm so aware, is what I am, and I had to get really clear on that. And the reminder remedies that we do really open me up to see just how much more I'm aware I am. So you put that on top of some real good therapy and on top of some real good self-awareness and work, like I'm wide open for business when it comes to
Mhm.
connecting energetically with the right people. So I will say today I have learned through a lot of sacrifice, and I'll talk about that because I think that's important to understand this Kyra, this girl, this one right
Mhm.
here, this the bomb right here,
Mhm.
this one. Um, but through a lot of sacrifice, how important it is to be honest with myself and do the work. And even if it exposes my weaknesses, I'm still willing to do the work. And so what that has afforded me is a group of people that know me and love me enough to hear my tone and my voice to know I need to check in on you differently. This is not a phone call, I'm on my way. Or what's really going on, Kyra? So not just the, oh, I'm good, y'all, what's up? Because I'll go
Mhm.
there for a minute, but for those that know you for real, like when you've been able to be okay with being, when you've learned to be okay with being vulnerable amongst those that love you, that's a barrier to get through. uh,
Mhm.
then you create this really beautiful space for you to live and to occupy, even including my kids. So I'm gonna go back. So I was married at 20 years old, full of hopes, dreams, and all the things you can think of, ready to conquer the house on the hill, white picket fence, car and a half, and a dog. I mean, a house, two kids and a half, and a dog, and a couple cars. Did all of that, and even the dog, y'all, he ended up having to go away at the end because it was a rat bull mastiff. Like that thing was gonna get big. I have my limits, and I wasn't having it. So my but went through an amazing journey for 23 years total of marriage, and at about year 20, really probably about year 13, I knew things were shifting, and I knew something was happening to me. I was changing. And I do remember my husband at the time saying, "You're changing." And I thought that
Mhm.
was a bad thing, right? At this point, I'm in
Mhm.
my 30s. I'm like, oh, that can't be good, right? Because I didn't understand what that meant. And he kept saying, "You're changing." And then he was like, "I need you to just recognize you're changing." He would say that. And I was like, well, okay. But to me, it felt like a bad thing. And I
Mhm.
resented that. But I really was changing. And my changing was so internal and so external all at the same time. I just was a part of the process. I didn't, it was like I never stepped out of my body to take a look at what was happening to me. And so it was just all happening. And so over time, I really started to wake up and acknowledge some of the things that I had allowed from my childhood, as we all have that, those things that really took me out. And so at 16, I had two suicide attempts because I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. My parents were present, but they didn't see me. They weren't managing their child, the parenting part of this thing, right? They were missing some things. And I say that giving them all the grace, because they were doing what they could do in the space that they had, to occupy. But I will say I was that kid that fell through the cracks. And I'm
Mhm.
just grateful that, neither of the attempts took. I'm grateful that the emotional abuse was ended, and I wasn't harmed unto death, But what I learned from there, kind of coming full circle, was there were a lot of holes and gaps I was trying to fill. And a lot of it I filled in a way that was probably more fake than it was organic or authentic, because I was really just trying to happy my way into another space. I was trying to just happy my way into another existence. And what do I mean by that? Like I was just trying to, it's gonna be all right. I'm gonna move to the next level. You just keep trying to push and go especially when you realize that you're I had my parents, but they were not drivers for me or my success. They were, she got it, she's mature. Kyra's, she's always gonna take care of herself. She's working, she's doing all the things. But they saw that as me being a very independent young lady. And I was truly, truly in survival mode because I realized that they had not paid attention to what was really happening to me. And I realized I then, through some very clear conversations with the Lord, had to step in and be very intentional about my future. And so I just started working, and working became the thing that hid me from the world, that saved me in terms of like keeping me safe. And so I worked and it was just, it felt good. It was gratifying. Of course, there was money associated with it, but I just worked. I learned how to work. And in doing that, I had this longing that most, girls that grow up with some vacancies around the daddy space have. And I was looking for a level of safety and companionship. And quite frankly, I really knew that I had found that when I married my kid's dad. At 20, I found what I needed. As I got older, I started to become this version of me. And in becoming this version of me, I really started to become more authentic. So the things that I had on, like a cape or like a shell that were just helping me move along, they started to fall off. And when I moved to Texas, I'm originally from Detroit. When I moved to Houston, there was so much exposure, because like that normal rhythm and pattern you have, that work, church, home, family, that whole thing was gone. And I'm like, well, shoot, do I have a relationship with God? Let me check that out. Microphone check, 1 2 1 2. You there? Can you hear me? And then it was, are we really gonna be okay? Do we got to raise these kids by ourselves? At that time, I had all three of my kids. Um, I'm like, well, shoot, we've had such a strong support system. Can we handle it? Can we handle it based on how we think and how we would like to move around? So we really had to become a unit for real. And in becoming a unit for real, things that I had taken on as like, I'll say like, where I thought I was maybe not the good financial manager, when we moved to Houston, I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing pretty good financial with this financial management. Oh, I think it's you. Let's tighten up over here. So I could start to then see where I was actually strong. I could see where our relationship was strong, and I could also see where we were weak across the board. So I just started really trying to build my career, got my master's. My kids were moving along, had a son to graduate, and around about 2014 I was like, okay, things are moving. I'm about to move into this entrepreneur space. I had just lost my job, and I was like, now how do we, like, how do you do this? Now mind you, probably around 2013 is when I saw the foundation breaking in our relationship. But because you've got these other distractions, you got kids going to school and you got all this good stuff happening, you just kind of get drowned in it and you focus. And and then once, I would say probably about 3 years later, it was like I hit this wall, and I had become a version of myself I'd never seen before. And it was really because I had to. Because I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur coming out of corporate. I was at a director level in corporate America, but um, entrepreneurship's a different animal. And I had insecurities around how to do that. And then I really started to see me. Like, I was like, wait a minute, Kyra, you're smart, girl. Now I knew I graduated with honors and all that kind of stuff, but it was different because it was like right here on paper, and people were writing checks in front of my face saying validation, validation, validation. Or as my therapist would say, that's evidence of your work. Um, and so I started to really see myself. It took me a long time to see this girl, and I saw her, and I was like, you've been playing small. You've been playing small. And it was almost like the veil was lifted off my eyes, and all of a sudden I could see, and the light shined on me. It was one of those moments, and I was like, okay, what is this? So there was a level of confidence and courage that really came up in me. And I started to realize the things that I've always cared about, like community and other people. I've always cared about how other people felt, because I realized that was the one thing that I don't think a lot of people cared about for me when I was younger. How did I feel? How did that make me feel? So naturally, you try to create the solutions for others that you didn't have for yourself, or you try to be something for somebody else that you couldn't get for yourself. And that's a natural response. But that's really what started happening. And so I started to just really create a culture that I fell in love with. So obviously it starts in your home, and you work hard, you work hard, you work hard. And as I was going through that process, I was working so hard to not walk away from, this relationship with these kids and this man and this house and these responsibilities. And I say walk away, meaning emotionally exit, because that was the first step of leaving, right? And I was just like, man, I see so many things that I have done myself down for, or I have stepped into a back seat for, or I've been controlled and I've been molded to think a certain way for so long. And I don't put that blame on anybody. I just think as a woman, I woke up and I had to look at all the circumstances and realize that this was now on me. So I just started the work of really of counseling and all the things collectively, like what do we need to do? And so I started working internally on the family, because what I realized, and this it might sound harsh, I realized that he was able to see the light in me all along.
Mm.
Almost like, how long can I kind of keep it, covered before she sees it?
Mm.
And so, what I think back when he said I was changing, that was probably when he saw that light going off, right?
Mhm.
I didn't have an interpretation for it. And so I think when he realized I was starting to see myself, and then other people were seeing me, and then all of a sudden my name started to move around in the city and become really, I became very visible. I think that part was like, okay, I can't control this anymore.
Mm.
There was definitely some control things happening, but it took me so long to see them. I just thought this was a part of how this thing worked for me. And so when I finally saw them, I just started trying to break them down and open them up, right? Let's get into this thing. Let's figure it out. So, to kind of spring it forward, it really took me to get to one of those pivotal points where you're having these arguments and it's taking you, a week to recover, and I don't hold grudges, but man, it was rough kind of trying to bounce back. And I remember him saying, man, it's taking you a long time to come back. I remember him saying that, like it was like he could see
Mhm.
it all, and I'm like, I'm in it. He could see it though, like he had an aerial view, but I'm like, he's so like he's really paying attention. No, his game was way on. He was on, and I'm like, dang. So when he said it, I was like, man, it is. It's taking me a long time to come back. And that's when I knew there was like this an emotional tearing away was happening. And I love so hard, like a lot of us do. There were so many reasons why I wanted it to be okay, to stay, to work. But I realized that there were so many conditions that I had allowed myself to fall into. I got to a place as I'm coming out of this kind of blossom, this bloom is opening up. I really couldn't breathe. And
Mm.
it was like the control just started to get tighter and tighter on me, and the pressure and the comments and the accusations and all the things. And here I am, this happy go lucky, super loyal, wife. Like I'm super, super submissive. I'm the picture of like, I won't say I'm whatever you like, but I'm real close, to something,
Mhm.
to my man. I'm
Right.
taking care of you. Like I'm serving you because I want
Mhm.
you to know you got the best. And
Mhm.
um, when I realized that that started to become a bartering tool or manipulative or manipulation tool, like all this stuff, I just started to see. I just woke up and I was like, okay, this ain't gonna work. And the kids could see it, and the kids were like, they would say things, and I was like, huh. My forgiveness lane is real long, and so I just kept trying and trying and trying, and finally I got to a point where some things happened. So I guess God was like, look, you need me to show you. Let me just show you. He's like, log on. Okay, now you see everything you need to see. It was one of
Mhm.
those. And I'm like, okay, fine. And
Mhm.
I really just started to say, okay, God, well, show me the path. Like, show me the plan. I'm a strategist at heart. So I'm going to strategize the plan and have a blueprint before I walk away from anything. So what does this look like? What are the solutions? What are the best, possible outcomes? How can I make this live? And then what does it look like for the kids after? How do I manage that? And then I really set some strong intentions, Alena. And I think this gets us to this space. Some very strong intentions as I started the process. And, at 42, like finally living on my own, you know, um, at 42 for the first time, like with kids, like a whole house call. I gotta do all of this stuff. Like my first trip to Home Depot where I gotta buy a ladder.
Right.
Ah, you know, It sounds silly, but if I was go by a ladder and I was bringing it back home to the family, it would be the same thing. It was just, I was by myself, and it was like one of those moments. I was like, I'm officially that lady, right? Okay, can y'all help me out? I need all these things. So anyway, Alena, I recognized, I really recognized who I was, and it was really the journey of going into entrepreneurship. And I will say this for anybody that thinks, oh, it was about becoming this bad boss. No, absolutely not. That's not what it was for me. It was about seeing myself, seeing my children. I stepped out. I was so out there that I could look back at my life and realize this is not normal. I started to be exposed to other families and other people, and I was like, this is not normal. I was getting in organizations and hanging out with more women that had, lifestyles that I could see, even relationships that I could see. And I was like, this is not right. And so it just took that. It was like I just had to get popped upside the head to see this is not right. And when I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And at that point, I was committed to being better for me. And I remember my daughter asking me a question that was crazy. And it was like, Mom, I wonder what you would be like single. I was like, whoa. Now, she didn't know what was going on in my head, but I remember standing in that pizza joint and she said that to me. And I was like, well, what will make you ask me that? And she said, well, I just wonder. I said, well, what do you think? She's like, oh, I think you'd be pretty cool. And I was like, oh, okay. That's one of those stingers. You'll never get that. Like, what the heck? They can see more than you could ever, we never know. And so we got to the point where there was just no way out. Obviously, I decided to walk away and make a decision for my family. The kids and I moved. And when I tell you, Alena, it was a year of harsh realities and all the things. But I became so committed to not becoming this bitter Black woman, bossy bee, all the things. I didn't want to be her. I wanted to be. I am loving. I am kind. I am open. I care about how people feel. I still care about how he feels as a human being because I can tell where the breaks are. And I'll still go back, and even as a woman, you still in some way go back and just like protect that person almost from themselves. Like I'll still send messages saying this would be a benefit if you did this, or maybe you should think about it like this. I'll still do that. And I'm still kind. It took me a long time to be kind. But I was very humane with him. I had to learn how to be kind because we got volatile for a minute. So I was committed to not losing me, the real me, the friendly, the 16-year-old before, the emotional violations. Like the me that was like, the world is a great place, y'all. We should enjoy living here. Let's all hold hands and figure this thing out. Like kumbaya Kyra, and my sisters and they would just tease me like, you always want everybody holding hands. I'm like, no, but it's okay if we do, right? Like
that's exactly yeah.
That's my personality. But I had to find her. And when I found her, I found this serious version of her, this boss ass bad ass version of her, this very focused and committed parent version of her, this open communicator version of her. All of that came together. And I think when that came together, the most brilliant thing I think that happened is I kept hearing people say, man, you are glowing. Like, what's up? And I hadn't heard that right since I was pregnant, right? So I'm like, well, I don't know. But I really think that there was such a beautiful energy that I had walked into and accepted and started to radiate because I was committed to being whole, doing the work, the healing, and not being angry about 20 plus years of life that I could have lived differently. Golly. But not the part, it's not even him. You know what I'm saying? It's not, I don't have any, I guess I've thrown some daggers in it, but I don't have any to really throw. It's more like, if I knew then what I knew now kind of conversation. And it's how can I max out like right now and be certain that every relationship, right? Every one of them has the hues and the virtues that I know work best for me. Like you said, you work best in spaces where you don't have to prove yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
care who you are. Showing up is exactly what we need you to do.
Mm-hmm.
That might sound like utopia for some people, but man, that's a space I desire to occupy at all times.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. It's peaceful here, and it's
Mm-hmm.
productive, and it's financially beneficial.
Man, I feel like okay. So first of all, that was just like such a I got my look. I'm a grandma. I got my little yes. Let's pull out the fireside chat. Such a
Yes.
vulnerable, relatable story. I think that this is probably the first time on the show that we've really been able to kind of hear about someone's journey of kind of evolving, right? And kind of that full story. And, one of the things that stood out to me though in your story was something that I have been guilty of in my own life, something that I see sometimes impacting people in my circle and clients. And it's this, and I'm not going to name it this in the sense of this is what you went through, but it's almost like this addiction to the chase, right? So it's like, okay, we got the husband, we got the kids, we got the house, we got the career. And it's like you kind of are always in growth mode and
Yeah.
elevation mode. And to some degree, that is really how the picture is painted, right? It's like this upward trajectory. And it's not, if you ain't moving forward and you're not going from one big event to the next big event, one hashtag to the next hashtag, meaning like I have literally just watched people speak and I can say that people like go from one hashtag to the next, meaning like, you had a hashtag for the engagement. Now you in the hashtag for the wedding. Now you got a hashtag for the baby shower.
Yes.
Hashtag for the, and it's basically no space or no breathing room in that. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is that that's the vision that everyone is painted is like, hey, you go from one season to the next job, to the next career, and if at any moment in time it doesn't move in that direction, it's like you bury yourself in the next thing,
Woo.
right? So
That's
I think that
in my both sides of my face.
it's
Like,
crazy because, that was one of the reasons why I think COVID was so hard for a lot of us. And that's because it was the first time we were forced to just be still, right? So it wasn't like you could numb the uncertainty of your personal life or of whatever you're dealing with by filling up your calendar with events on the weekend or traveling your way out of it or, working to the bone. It was kind of like, oh, shoot, I have to be here with myself 24/7 or be here with this man or be here with this baby, or be here with my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Like all of these things that for whatever reason, we haven't moved in a pace that allows us to really audit and create that ongoing self-awareness. And it's scary. It's scary that 2020 was the first time that many of us did that, right? And so I think that when you tell that story, to some degree, it's almost as if you wake up from the busyness of it all and you're like, holy crap, like, how did I even get here?
Yeah.
And why did I keep putting this band-aid, on this scenario? So I'm curious though, like, even with, because it sounds like there at some point you started to change, maybe not in a way that it was like as intentional as it is now or post divorce, but the moment that he said you're starting to change, what do you think was happening to you in that moment where either naturally things just started coming off or you just kind of woke up one day and started reading books and becoming who you like? What do you feel like happened in that moment in time?
Man, it's so crazy because I really think I was on that achievement riser, right? I was stepping on that ladder, achieving, achieving, achieving. And at that age, that's kind of what you're doing. You're having babies, and I was non-traditional student, all the things. I'm having kids, going to school, getting these degrees, and being very competitive with myself to meet my goals. I'm very goal oriented, and so that was a driver for me. These are the things I'd like to achieve, not with everything kind of kicked to the wind. It was more like, how do we make this fit in our life? Okay, you're gonna go get your degree, I'm gonna go get mine. It was kind of one of those things, and so very equitable. But I think what happened, and I remember the day that he said that, and I was sitting on the side of the bed. That was also the first time that he said, I'm leaving. And that was about 2014-ish. So that was the first time he said he was leaving. And I thought to myself, because when we got married, one of those couples where we made a pact. These are the words you can't say. You cannot say these words. Off limits. These are part of the rules, house rules. And I didn't play with it. Like, I took my yes is solid and my no is pretty committed as well. You might be able to convince me otherwise, but my yes was solid. And so I remember him saying it. And when he said he was leaving that time, he had done it before, like kind of like this threatening, whatever, because I knew that I had exposed some weaknesses. And I think my past gave him privilege to what he thought were really significant weaknesses. And maybe I hadn't grown stronger from what I experienced as a child. And I think he just used that as this knowledge in the toolkit. Like, I know I can manipulate her here. I remember him saying before, like, if one of us leaves, like, this could happen. Like, what you gonna do? And I remember him one time saying, like, what, you gonna kill yourself? And I was thinking to myself, man, that's like off limits. And then for you to say that, right?
That's like them high school arguments where you be like, who you gonna call, your mama, knowing that they mama dead.
It was like, damn. Like, that hit me in the gut. It was a gutter, sucker punch, all the things. And I thought to myself, like, you don't have a response to that. Because your response, I'm a real Aquarius. I'm right here until I'm not. Like, if I leave this space, like, you've had a lot of opportunities for me not to even leave this space. It takes so much for me to come out of here. So what I mean by that is, like, I'm typically on a 7 and I'm good and I can see the brighter side of most things. And so when I get past that point, or you take me into a dark space, or you trigger something, and I've told you, like, I gave you access to that deepest of me, which I should have. When I heard that, I was like, whew, that's a different kind of communication right there. Okay, know that. Put that in your toolkit and hold on to that one, Kai. And then when the day he said he was leaving, I remember, and I think I wrote it down in my journal, I was okay. I thought to myself, okay, well, let's do it at the Christmas break so it's not so difficult for the kids. And I remember, like, having that, like, snap moment. And I was like, I think I'm good. And so I called my dad, and I never called my father ever about my relationship. I'm that girl. If I call my daddy, like, it's probably not, this is the smoke you really don't want. And I called my father. My father said, what? He said, now, if it was anybody else, I would believe this. He said, I just don't believe this. When I tell you couples goals, couples goals. Even from my parents, my dad and my stepmom, not my mom and my dad, my stepdad and my stepmom, we were couples goals. He said, oh, no. I don't. I anybody other than him. Kyra, no. My dad. I said, Daddy, okay. I said, how many times have I ever called you? He said, this is the first. I said, exactly. That was it. And I never called him again. And then about 4 years later, I was at the house, like, look, this is the plan. This is what's about to happen. My dad's looking at me like, this girl is really serious. And I'm like, yeah, I am. My daddy was in denial. Like, that's his son. He was in denial, like, no way. And I thought to myself, you're supposed to be on my team. My dad was a soldier for him. And I mean, but I think the snap was that when I realized I was okay, that in 2014, when he said it the first time, I knew then he had broken the seal. You know what I'm saying? That seal had been broken. Now I'm like, well, anything's possible. Let's try. And that's what happened. So when they say, the things you can manifest, You can manifest that stuff. You can create that. If you open that door, the other one's coming right behind it. It's going to swing open. And so you can't do it if you really want to stay in the space that you're in. If you really love that person, don't use what you know to hurt them, because you don't know what's happening inside of them. They're not going to be that person forever. And I'm not 16, I'm 45 now, right? So I'm not going to be her forever. And so I just, that was one of those really big awakenings. And that was around that time where he said I was changing. And so hence why I felt like it had a negative connotation.
I just think that even, your story, this example is so powerful, because there are many situations where people get into relationships, partnerships, jobs, any kind of commitment where you come in as one version and you evolve into something else, and you have two choices. You go stunt your growth, right? Because it's kind of like, okay, this is familiar, this is comfortable, even though it feels like I'm busting loose from the seams. Or you have the choice to be like, okay, outside of these clothes and this life that I've painted, or this safety net, or whatever the identity is in that moment in time, is more, and I'm willing to get to that place, right? So I think about, I was listening to a podcast episode the other day, and this lady was like married to her high school sweetheart. I want to say like almost 38 years or something. This lady is a life coach, and very much admired by her audience and her followers or whoever because of her marriage. And so they asked, like, how do y'all keep y'all marriage alive? And she pretty much said, to be honest, there are 3 times in our relationship where we basically had to decide if we wanted to stay or whether we wanted to go. And in each of those moments, we decided that the relationship that we were in, or the current status that we were in, we were no longer interested in. So the only way that we could move forward is if we decided that from this day, that relationship doesn't exist anymore, and we're now going to honor whoever we are in these new stages of our life.
Ooh, that's good. That's real good.
Mind blown. And then what she said was, she woke up realizing like, oh, my husband is not the type of man that I want to be with anymore. Like, he's not serving me in the space that I am in my life anymore. But one of her friends or her coach or whoever challenged her and said, okay, well, are you the type of woman that you would need to be for him to be that type of man? Ooh. And, in the example, I want to say it was something along the lines of, him being more head of the household and her taking a step back. And, she was like this type A woman. And it was like, the reality is, I've played this part for so long that of course he couldn't step up because there was no space for him.
Yeah.
So in order for him to play that role in this next season, I got to come here and I got to stop doing this and I got to stop whatever. Right. And from that moment on, they became this new couple. Right. And she said they happened 3 times. And I thought that was so beautiful, because it makes it where it honors this whole idea of like, we're constantly evolving. There's no way I'm going to be the exact same person I was from the moment I stood on the altar. Right.
But Alena, you're not, but what it takes for the two of you to get to a point where you can actually have that conversation and that be a real transaction in your marriage, that is another level of maturity and understanding and commitment. Like, that's a solid yes. I always say, is your yes big enough? Because you're willing to fight through anything if it makes sense, right? I promise you. And so that's so powerful. Like, that's powerful beyond. And I think that's probably when people ask you like the how did you do it? Tell that story every time, because I think little bits of us have done it in so many different ways. And, it made me think about behavior when you were telling that story, because there is a behavior that you have to own as the woman and as an alpha, right? I'm a submissive alpha, right? I don't know. Is that your story, Alena? I don't know, but I'm a submissive alpha. What does that mean? I don't need to, like, I can put my briefcase at the door, take my heels off and my blazer, and then let's do this thing. I don't need to project that at home. But what you asked was, I think, something we all deal with, and even now, single, I am very thoughtful around, because you do flex that masculine energy in, in this space, because you're having to be the thought leader for all these things: the money, the resources, the house, all the things. Even in marriages where you come in very dominant, that man doesn't have room to get in that spot. Doesn't have room for that spot. And when I'm thinking about my next cast and crew, or who I'm going to be cast to, right? Because I want to marry again. Oh my God, I love being a wife. I want to marry again. I want that level of companionship and transparency and vulnerability and relational support. But does that person have room to get in? Am I building and managing my behavior today so that there's room for that person in that space? And that's a real thought for me, because even dating, man, it's bad. It's like a 2-week cycle. I know. Nope.
Or I think that's a good point, though. And I think that even the challenge you have on yourself around, like, am I moving the way that I need to be to attract whatever life that I want? And I think that, that goes for obviously having a spouse and a partner, but also just like when we think about business owners, right? So, I work with clients who have these big ideas and these big dreams, and sometimes their business doesn't necessarily fully align with their values. So they may say, oh, I want to be, a super present mom, and I want to be at every gymnastics meet, and I want to be at carpool every day, and I want to cook 3 days a week, right? And they want to be like all in on motherhood, but they also want to build global businesses. And I'm like, okay, so let's have a reality check, right? Because when you think about building that speed that you're talking about 90% of your time on airplanes, right? Yeah. And so it then it's almost as if people immediately grab like these lifestyles that they see instead of crafting it. Okay, shout out to the life crafters. But I think that what you said is like, okay, how do I create a behavior and build in habits that reflect like who I really want to be, right? Instead of letting the person I want to be kind of be on hold until the time comes, right?
That's good, right there.
And I kind of watch you move like that, as you're. So I've come into Kyra's life on the other side of it, right? Like, post-divorce, post-corporate, and, the way that I watch you move is very intentional, but I also have seen you, even since we started kind of doing our thing within the company in terms of just like intentionality, be very mindful of, okay, Kyra, you want to, still have space. You want to create white space. You want to work out. You want to have girl time. You want to have me time. So how do you, I see you talk about, and this is because I'm on calls with her admin too, y'all. I see you craft your calendar in a way that honors that. So can you talk a little bit about what that has been like for you? Because I know that, when you first started building your business, you were like, yes, let's get to it. Let's get to the bag. It's money to be made. But how have you kind of started to bring in these other elements that are equal parts of kind of creating that full life?